everyone, how's it going?
Hey,
Hi, good. Very good. Try the end.
Okay, cool. So today's topic, the tarot in different societies, it just occurred to me that it would be interesting really to discuss this topic because how you approach the tarot, how much you can learn about it and how much you can learn from it. I think all of that gets influenced by these kind of conditioned expectations that you bring over to it. And these are expectations that you very often might have just absorbed from the society you grew up in, right? Um, so I think if how you learn the tarot and then how you actually practice it, but also how you experience a tarot reading and what you do with it, all of that depends on where you're coming from, what sort of expectations you have. And I'm from Kuwait, and there's a very rich, very old very old tradition of fortune telling through different means. For example, reading the grounds from coffee cups, for example, or throwing shells and reading their layout, or watching the sudden movements of birds, And I'm sure there are other divination methods I'm not even familiar with. But the tarot, I mean, even though it's, let's say, it has medieval origins. Let's say if you link it to the playing cards, right? You could link it to Mamluk Egypt, but you can even go farther back and link it to China, right? Where they say printing was first invented, right? Or at least the first cards. The tarot, as we know it, only developed in medieval Europe, maybe towards the end of the 14th century or the beginning of the 15th. And with time, the kind of European, the influence of the European kind of authorship of its meanings, its interpretations, and it's specifically in the esoteric dimension of the tarot that only increase over time, right? So when I went into the tarot and I learned it, I brought with me an interest in divination that wasn't foreign to the society I grew up with. However, no form of divination that I'd encountered as a child ever had a rich, explicit kind of history that was discussed and theorized, And so that was pretty new for me, kind of seeing all that historical, let's say, intellectual kind of heritage coming along with this method of divination that I was learning, right? So that was something new to me. Very fascinating. I enjoyed it very much. So when I came back from abroad, I was a student abroad for many years. And when I came back to Kuwait and started doing tarot readings for people, I would say more than 95% of the time, I'd have a hard time sort of establishing common ground between me and the clients, and sort of paving the way for the reading to happen. Because they'd always approach me with a style, let's say, a type of expectation that was much better suited for the types of divination they do here, right? And that was that was the expectations I'm talking about. They fall into the mindset of posing very general question as if the client as a person doesn't really have agency over their future, over the outcome, as if the future is something that happens to you and you're a passive you're a passive kind of not target, but the passive recipient of the influences, right, from the stars or whatever, right? So they'd come with questions like, am I gonna meet the love of my life, or am I gonna get married, or is my child gonna um, is my child going to get married for the nosy parents? Is my child going to do well at school? I very rarely get any nuanced questions, you know? And so I'd have to kind of open the session by explaining that, at least the way I learned this craft, we don't treat the future as a set of givens that's just going to happen, but we treat it in a more nuanced way, right? That this is the likely outcome if this approach is taken, right? And then I'd have to explain that this nuanced kind of approach to the possible and to manifesting the possible or not is built into even the spreads that I learned, right? The spreads that I learned to use from Mandy, my teacher, and yeah, so the whole concept of like walking them, like talking with them to establish a set of questions and then walking through the questions with them, that was utterly foreign to at least 95% of the local clients that I read for. Um, so yeah, it's still a challenge. I feel like when I do read for people to kind of explain to them the process and the philosophy behind it. The other thing is the reason why it is, and I mean, it'll likely remain difficult, is that there is no uh, space, there's not enough social space for the free discussion of anything esoteric or anything potentially magical, you know? So then you can't just put on for sale books about the tarot that could explain, what the symbols in it are, and what divination is, or what the philosophy of or different philosophies of divination might be, and what the esoteric history is, what the esoteric philosophy. None of that is there. You'd have to acquire it from abroad.
Khalid, can I just interrupt you a second? Would you
Yeah.
say the majority of the people that are coming to you for tarot readings in your country are women?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
That might explain, especially with the kind of the different culture of maybe women in the Middle East to maybe here, like in London or whatever. Maybe they are more kind of automatically. I might be wrong here, but are they more passive, thinking that life happens to them rather than that they can go out and make their life happen? I'm not saying they're completely, that I'm not saying they have no freedom, but is the mindset, like, as a starting point, a bit in general different?
I would say it's a very interesting point. I mean, maybe that might have to a degree, maybe that might have a kind of a role in encouraging them to go and seek a reading. But I think this attitude towards the future, right? That basically, okay, the future as something fated, right? That attitude is something prevalent across the culture. It doesn't depend on gender, I think.
All right, okay.
As soon as you link, let's say, divination, as soon as you link the idea of the future with the idea of divination, then you're also linking their lives with the idea of higher powers and fate, right? And so, yeah, that attitude has always been, yeah, fate works from above and then on us,
Yeah.
And so when we go to a reader, what we're trying to find out is not how we can cleverly, let's say, manage our lives, but how we can know what our chances are and when to expect them. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, so that's what really got me interested in the topic.
It is quite interesting because I remember like when I was on Cambridge Market, I mean, it's a very international city, Cambridge, because there's like students here, Cambridge University, from literally all over the world. So you do get absolutely all the different cultures coming to you, you know, and I did have sort of several sort of Middle Eastern clients. I remember once a lady came up and she said to me, "What is this all about?" And I just chatted to her and explained it all to her, you know, and she went, "Oh," she said, "I don't think that this would be kind of encouraged in my culture, but I really want to have a go." And she did. She just sat down and had a reading and like was absolutely kind of, it was like her opportunity to explore something like this, you know. So yeah, I've always remembered her because I just thought she really is just kind of chatting about it. I didn't expect her to kind of then say, "Come on, then, let's do it," sort of thing, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, another culture that I found really interesting was I got booked to do a wedding once, and I didn't actually know until I got there that they were all religious Jews. I was really surprised. All of the men, I mean, this was the reception after the wedding, but all of the men were wearing their hats and caps and they were quite religious. But it was obviously men and women. Every single guest at that wedding had a reading. And every single woman, apart from one, all they wanted to know, it was the same question from every woman, and there was one that was different, and that was were they going to have children, or were they going to have more children if they had children already? That is all they were interested in. And one woman asked about, was she going to travel, and all of that. And I just thought, whoa, you are so different from every other woman that's here at this wedding. It was fascinating.
Yeah, I'm
I
curious.
have to say, Mandy, I have to say, sorry to butter you, and I'm watching, but when you said about the Jewish wedding, I have a colleague that I read for who was Jewish, and it pulled up the Nine of Swords, and she's like, it looks like a prayer. She said the name of it, but this is a Jewish prayer to me to listen. So I thought that was really interesting. Her culture, as she saw it, brought that meaning, and so now I have that meaning. So if I know I'm reading for anybody who has Jewish background, that might be something they need. So I was like, wow, that's the culture thing.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that is really fascinating.
That's a really good point too, because if you're reading for someone who's not your own culture, you have to make sure you're reading the cards and not putting in your bias or your opinion or how you would culturally do something, because what our culture, what my American culture says is the answer. Khalid's culture may be like, wow, no, that's not allowed, you know? So we always have to be aware that we're all so very different. And my answer, my opinion may not be the answer for the person sitting across from me. I have to read the cards.
Yeah,
definitely. And that's, I had a mentor once tell me, if you want to read for everyone, you have to meet people where they're at, you know. So you don't have to be and that's, if you're just reading the cards will work with whatever context that you're giving it in. But I've read for people in many different religions and many different faiths, and I don't have to understand what their belief systems are, but meeting someone in a way, and that it works too with your delivery, right? You it's not that you treat people differently, but it's interesting how the cards speak to what that person, you know. It's cool how that works that way, meeting people where they're coming to you from. And that works too with even just spiritual concepts and stuff. You know, you're not gonna start talking about some very abstract esoteric thing if the person you're talking about A, doesn't know what you're talking about, or B, it may not be something that they believe in or they think is a truth that maybe you feel is. So it's a really cool dynamic when you're reading cards just in a very open and I don't know, flat, just a very basic foundational way that it does cross cultures so beautifully.
And I love that we have the opportunity to cross cultures and meet so many different people with the different belief systems and how they were raised, and be able to meet at an equal table. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I was reading for someone recently who was saying in their culture, I mean, you might relate to this more, Khalid, you know, the men are allowed to have several wives at the same time, you know, and this person was, that's right, they were involved with someone who also had another wife, and but that was accepted, and they were saying, like, if I let this relationship go further, am I going to end up kind of as another wife, or are they likely to kind of get rid of this other wife and just want me? So it was a sort of cultural thing, to be honest, not a kind of a passing judgment thing. So yeah, I mean, you can't question that at all. You just have to kind of go with that.
Right. You have to basically take on the question that they're paying you for.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I would say though, if I was going to lump people together, the only group of people, and I'm not necessarily saying this applies to everybody in this group, but the only time that I've had what would you call it, like real negativity, and it was on the market, was with the born again Christians. There was, over the 2.5 years I was there were a handful of people that came into the stall and were really rude and negative, and it's like, you should be shut down, blah blah blah, and they were all from that organization.
Very, very, not all of them, but the ones that make themselves known. You know how the squeaky wheel always gets the grease. The ones that make themselves known are very opinionated and want you to live how they expect you to live. I've seen tarot readers do it. Not just Christian tarot readers, but tarot readers try to tell somebody, you know, this is how you're supposed to be living. This is what you're supposed to be doing. This is what that's not our place. But the baby Christians, I live in the deep South, and I've got a lot of Southern Baptist around me. And I know a couple of years ago, I was in an ambulance, and you're trapped in an ambulance. You got nowhere to go. And the guy was talking to me, trying to calm me down. And he was like, "What do you do for a living?" I was, "I'm a tarot reader." Lord Almighty, the rest of the way to that hospital, oh my God, have you been saved by the blood of the Lamb? And honestly, I was like, it's none of your business.
Trapped in an ambulance. Oh my God.
Oh my God. I wanted to say, get me a different ambulance, but what can you do? So, and it was about a half hour in the ambulance, and he was like frothing at the mouth, telling me that Christians don't do that. I was like, what makes you think I'm a Christian? I am, but
I mean, that line was very poetic. Have you been saved by the blood of the Lamb?
I've read tarot for a lot of Christians and Catholics and God knows what. It's just, there's that extremity that really are very much against it and will make that very known.
And those are the fanatics. Those are the fanatics, or people who are afraid of us, because I honestly don't think the guy in the ambulance was a fanatic to say, but he was. The minute I said I read tarot, you could see the fear on his face. It was, oh shit, can she read my mind type of thing? Like,
yeah.
I think we can lump.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think we can lump a group of people together with the title, perhaps closed-minded or set in their ways type people are challenging sometimes to discuss with as the work that we do.
The South is challenging. But I do have clients here, and there are a number of people who say, "Ooh, that sounds interesting. I want to learn about that," or "Ooh, can we do a reading?" You know, so I'd say it's about 50-50 between, you devil, God, you know, throwing salt at me and shit. I've had rocks thrown at me. I have. I actually have. But it is getting better. It's not as bad now as it was in the 90s or the 2000s. It is getting better as awareness grows.
So yeah, I mean, this question, I guess I could pose to all of you. So anyone who would like to answer, please go ahead. So how many, like roughly, how often is it that your clients understand tarot reading as a form of a special psychic ability and perceive you as a psychic and possibly, you know, a witch?
South, I've been called a witch since I can remember. I mean, since I can remember. Because of that, I've never practiced any form of witchcraft because I'm just not a witch. But it put me off of witchcraft because of the negativity associated with it. But I've I've got family members who will tell people that I am a witch.
But how many of your clients associate tarot reading either with, you know, being psychic in a mysterious way, or with actively practicing magic?
At first, I'd say most of them, but after they get to know me, they just don't have that association anymore.
And do you feel like you have to explain to them the process of like what's happening when you're asking them the questions and shuffling the cards?
No, not really. I'm just my goofy ass self.
Okay.
You know, I'm just retain being me and don't try to be all reach into your inner child. I don't do that stuff. I just act like me.
I mean, you're not wearing a hooded cloak?
I would say that there's more of a possibility. I think certain people, when they ring up, they are wanting a medium. And it becomes sort of obvious, like just very quickly in the conversation, that that's what they're actually looking for. And they think that a tarot reader is a psychic medium. So I get that quite a lot. I don't think I've ever been asked if I was a witch. But I have been asked when I've done events and parties and things like that. I often get asked if I'll dress up. So they want me to kind of look the part. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean wear a witch's hat or like Halloween, but they want me to look a bit mystical, you know, that sort of thing.
Like a gypsy?
Yeah.
Well, not one person actually wanted me to look like a gypsy, like literally wanted me to wear like hoop earrings and the whole thing. And I went, no. It's just too naff. But I thought, I don't mind coming looking a bit kind of, you know, mystical and that sort of thing at all. I think that's quite nice, you know, that it blends in with kind of like the candles and all, and the atmosphere and the ambience of the thing, you know, rather than just sort of turn up in jeans and a t-shirt. I kind of, yeah, I do like to kind of like feel that I bring an air of mysticism into the room. If I'm at an event, if I'm doing an event, I've a little bit of me's got my entertainer kind of mentality, you know, like I wouldn't turn up to do entertainment without a costume, in a sense.
I think most cultures, and especially with the media today, equate tarot and astrology and all of that with the new age or the witchcraft movement, or have a long history as their seers being high placement you know, the mystery and removed a bit from society. So I think it's only natural that people come to us with the way, with what they know, the average person with what they know of tarot or astrology or any of what we do. It has that air of mystery just naturally built in for hundreds and hundreds of years. Mandy?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, because I have done quite a lot of events, and you might have experienced this, Cassidy, as well, because you've done quite a lot of live events. I do get people that kind of say, oh, I was drawn to you, you know, and that's obviously kind of how you've presented yourself in some sort of way. Like, it was, people can't, I think at a live event, people, and you know, like, say there are a whole load of readers or things like that, something about you or your presentation, like maybe your stall, your stand, you know, just how you set yourself up is going to kind of call people in. Because one thing I never did on the market or at any event was stand there and go, anyone want a tarot reading? I'm over here, right? Never ever, right? Even though I'm capable of doing that, like as a children's entertainer, I'd be hello and all of that, but as the tarot reader, I would kind of hope that the energy would kind of attract people to me and my stall. And when I'm saying me, I don't necessarily just mean my you know, my natural glamour. I'm not talking about that. But I'm saying, you know, just my presentation would be intriguing. Kind of thing. I do think that's part of it if you're at an event.
And it just naturally has the air of mystery because of the focus that has been put off it or taken off of it. And so I for the longest time, I railed at the word psychic. I absolutely despised that word because it encompassed so much. And everybody thinks that just because you can read cards, you have to be all knowing. And the only all knowing is the universe. Nobody can be all knowing, and anybody who claims to be is full of shit. So I always said I'm not psychic. But over time, I believe that I am. Yeah. I believe that I have a very strong gift of being able to speak with the universe or God or gods or whatever it is out there helping me. And that has been learned and fine-tuned. I do believe that we are all psychic, even though we say we're not, because we've developed an ability that other people do not have.
Right.
Yeah.
So would you say most of your clients who are comfortable, they get used to kind of the mystery of the energy exchange that happens in a tarot reading, would you say most of them are agnostic or spiritual in a kind of undefined way? Or maybe they're just like, or maybe they could be religious but in their mind separate their religion from the tarot reading experience, for example?
All of the above, and even religious and don't have to separate it. Once they realize that I'm not getting my information from the devil, you know, they're more open to it. Once they see that I'm not, you know, like, I don't even remember the first seer's name that just tells you this is going to happen, and that's all you know, you don't have a choice. Once they see that I am not foretelling the future, I am helping them cope with the future and the now, more the now than even the future. Once they see that, they're like, oh, okay, she's not a witch. She's not some crazy psychic, you know, that's going to curse me or whatever.
Yeah, so this is an interesting question because for me, it depends where the person found me in my services, how they got a hold of me, because if you're at an event, if you're at a mind, body, spirit fair, pretty much everybody there is interested in mind, body, spirit things. So that's kind of the net you're casting there. If I'm working on a phone line service, people have a different set of expectations because they're calling for kind of that sort of a service. I live on the west coast of Canada. We have a thriving spiritual community. it's not wickedly taboo to be into any of this stuff. In fact, anytime I've mentioned to someone I do this, they either say, oh, my so-and-so does this, or, oh, I've got a deck of cards and I don't know how to use it, or it's an interesting, I don't know, it's very like weaved into this society around here. It's very open. And if someone finds me on like a spirit metaphysical directory, there's like, you know, they're obviously into that sort of thing. But when you're saying too with the word psychic, and that's just a note, like how you advertise yourself based on what the average person and who you're advertising to, and based on the average person's understanding of the word. So that's why when I made my name Cassidy the Card Slinger, like I sling cards. I am a card reader. I'm not Psychic Cassidy, because I understand that although that like you said, that's a word that means so many different things to so many different people. But I wanted it to be quite clear, at least and anytime I present myself and my webpage, you know, any of the stuff that we put out there, I try to be very clear with what my services are. You'll still get people who don't read it. But, you know, for the most part, just how you advertise yourself attracts a different level of client. But I would say for the most part, it really is a mixed bag. Like you read for people who are in business positions and in other scientific fields or spiritual people, and people are all mixed bags of things in and of themselves. So it's interesting what side of people they will bring, because you can have someone say I'm running a dance studio, but they have a thriving Reiki practice as well, or you know. So we only get to see as much as we get to see and what someone will share with us, really. But it's cool because even if you're not spiritual at all, if you've come for a reading, there's something you're expecting generally to get out of it. Unless it's like a very spur of the moment thing, it's a festival, it's like, oh, how fun, let's get a tarot reading. You know, it really depends on where people find you and how you're providing that service.
I totally agree. Yeah, it does definitely come down to that.
Yeah, I'm curious to know if any of you, like, when you do readings for return clients who come back to you because some of the things that you predicted or divined came true, right? So those return clients, do you feel when they come back that in some way their perception of the world has changed? Like maybe they're interested more in the unknown, the unseen forces, you know, or maybe interested to learn more about the relationship between like the human mind and the universe, etc.
Again, that's a mixed bag. Like Cassidy said, I like that. There will be some that come back who really want to explore more. But I find a great deal of people just want guidance in their own lives, and they've got so much going on in their own lives already. They don't have room to grow in that direction at the moment.
Yeah.
Totally agree with that. It's like outsourcing to people who are good at what they do. You know, you
Yeah.
see a mechanic who's really good at it with your car. I'm going to go back to that mechanic. I'm not going to learn how to fix my own car. Like, no, I'm not good at that. So if you can outsource your divination questions to a good diviner, you can outsource your, you know, I need a really excellent meal, I'm going to a great restaurant. Like, find people who are good at what they do and trade with them, hire them for their services. I feel like that, in a way, though, certainly people do get interested, and if they know that, like, we all teach the tarot, so if they might, you know, ask you in that sense, like, oh, I kind of want to learn more. You do get that from time to time. But I would say for me, 70 to 80% of the folks I read for don't want to learn this skill for themselves. They just have a question.
70 to 80% that do want to learn dive in very shallowly, maybe dip their toes in, and then it's like, oh, that's too much work. You know.
No, I wasn't asking about wanting to learn the tarot, but just generally if like if some of the returning clients, let's say you start reading for someone who's adamantly atheist, right? Like adamantly atheist, and who comes with the assumption that if you're not a quack, then you're deluding yourself if you think you can divine anything, right? But then you do a proper reading for them, and then they come back and they're amazed and they're like, yeah, that everything you said just happened, like I've had it happen at least. There's one distinct experience that I had, but it stuck with me. And the person was a good friend, but he was like adamantly atheist. But then after I did the reading, and the reading confirmed like some things he didn't even want to share, right? His perception changed, right? And that hasn't happened often with me, but it has happened. And so I'm wondering if it happened with any of you too.
I think, sorry, go on, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I have an adamant atheist in my world. And when I read for him, he never acknowledges any power outside. He thinks I connect with him.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't make him. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think most of my clients that they believe in this sort of thing, and that's why they've booked it. So it's quite a good place to start from, because they sort of believe in this sort of thing anyway. They've got a bit of faith in it, and I'm more come into contact with people that are just curious when I do things like markets or festivals, that sort of thing. It's just people, why not? What have I got to lose, But interestingly, I have to be careful what I say, but somebody I'm very close to is very atheist, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And if I ever kind of mention the name of a tarot card or an astrological sign or anything like that, they switch off. So when I talk to them, but I want to give them a bit of wisdom, I just make sure I don't drop in any labels, and they're very receptive to what I'm saying, because they don't know that I'm actually kind of likening the situation to maybe a certain tarot card or a certain sign or something like that. I will just give the message without the labels. Right. And I am actually I do go into this zone without them knowing it.
That's hard to do. That is hard to do.
I've learned to do it because it's worth talking to them in this way than just not giving them the benefit of any of the wisdom,
Mm-hmm. But I think I could see someone being a hardcore atheist and being an excellent reader. I genuinely don't feel like you have to connect with anything or feel like you're connecting with anything or have any beliefs whatsoever in order to read the cards as a visual text for a divinatory session. It depends, though.
Believe. I agree with you when it comes to the reading and the interpretation, but I still think you have to believe that you've been given the cards you were meant to have been given. You have to have that some form of belief that the universe chose those cards and not you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I don't know that I agree with that, because you can just believe in a like bibliomancy, for example. You pick up a book, you go to a page, you can believe in the oracular of randomness, right? You don't have to necessarily feel that something came, guided you. I don't think it needs to, and I think everyone is free to believe anything they want to believe. But I really do think that if you're just reading the cards and you're not feeling like it was sent from somewhere, but rather it's me connecting with this tool, and that's all there is to it, I still think you could be an excellent reader. I don't think that belief in anything is a what do you call it?
Prerequisite.
Thank you for reading.
I'm gonna jump in on that, because interesting enough, I'm Buddhist, so that's my religion. But certain Buddhisms have deities, but the Buddhism I practice, the only thing is it's a cause and effect. So we believe in the law of cause and effect. So what happens comes back, and so we don't believe in a God. So that's why it's an atheistic religion. but
Mm.
we believe that when you chant and when you connect to the universe, what we're all connected to, then you bring wisdom out. So in a way, like, so when I'm reading it, that was spirituality was something I had to deal with tarot because of having my religion, stuff like that. And I was like, but it makes total sense, kind of what you just said, Cassidy, of the chance, the law of chance. But it's cause and effect. What's meant to be on there is going to trigger what I need to do to tell someone else. So that's where I think for me, the difference between atheistic and, like, I would say the people who don't believe in anything, like any kind of connection to each other, like, because atheistic is like no God. So I think that's the difference. If they don't believe in God or angels or the spirit or anything like that, then I don't think they would be able to understand the tarot. But if they believe in some sort of scientific or spiritual connection amongst us all and cause and effect, then does that make sense?
Some of the
Yeah,
tarot readers
yeah.
I know, like Carl Jung, is huge in the tarot, you know, but with writings and with tarot decks and people studying him, and a lot of people give it over to that collective consciousness that we all have
That's it,
inside
yeah.
of us. So
Yeah.
no matter what it is, it's another cultural thing by country, by city, by even cultural as in personal. It doesn't matter what religion or what your beliefs are, as long as you believe there is a way to communicate. Doesn't matter if it's fairies, if it's stardust, if it's fire genies, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's a sort of a style thing, really. It's like, for me, I don't think I'm giving the message. I just feel if someone comes because they want a reading, they're asking for an outside opinion. And I just feel, well, it's coming from the outside. But it's coming from me. I'm not your mother or your best friend or anything like that. I'm a professional tarot reader. So you've come to me for an outside opinion, but I'm not giving my message or my opinion. I'm giving the message that I'm supposed to give you, because I have got no idea what cards are going to come up or what that message is going to be until that moment I turn them over. So the message is whatever the message is. And I just think that's my style, and that's my headspace and my belief system, wherever that may be coming from.
And I do feel that I get the answers from outside. I don't believe the answers are ever wrong, but my interpretations of them can absolutely be wrong. So I have to be very careful to actually interpret the cards, you know, without putting in my opinion.
Yeah. And
Just
that's where like your, you know, each reader's, let's say, cultural background or conditioning might act either as, you know, as a helping influence or an obstructing influence to the receival of the message, you know?
however, I think there's something a bit different when it comes to astrology, because astrology is what it is. It's not like random cards being sort of like turned over. A person's birth chart is a person's birth chart. And obviously you've got the knowledge of the astrologer, like, you know, like how much astrology do they know? So therefore, how much are they capable of pulling out of the chart? But you've also maybe got the personality of the actual astrologer, rather than some outside voice coming in, choosing what is the appropriate thing to tell that client, you know, from the amount of information, the enormous amount of information that is there in front of them in the chart. So I don't see astrology as being spiritual, if you like, in the same way as tarot, but they do go very well together.
And astrology, that's fascinating to me, because you do have the science, you do have the numbers, the math, the whole dance going on. However, if someone were to come to me for a reading, I may focus on a different aspect of that math. You know, it's not just 1 + 1 = 2. There are different pieces of the math that work different ways together. And I may focus on one piece of it, but you would focus on another piece of it. So we would be giving different readings, but they would most likely marry well together unless we had a completely different way of reading.
Yeah.
We give different pieces. I love astrology because it allows us to know that it is all from perspective. That chart is that perspective that that person was born on that day. But it's also my perspective when I'm looking at that chart to interpret it. You know, their perspective, where they are right now. So it lends itself to more stability.
Okay, I got a question because you three are astrologers. So I'm just like that. I'm loving this conversation. So when you pull up a chart, the chart is what it is, and you interpret that chart. Scientific, one could argue not an intuitive ability, but more a deducing and analyzing sort of a skill.
Yeah.
Let's just use that for this argument. Now, you come upon a table. You have cards all over it. You didn't do the connecting. There's no spiritual aspect to it. So much like what I'm wanting to compare here is a chart to a bunch of cards, and the chart being read and analyzed as a thing versus the cards being read and interpreted as a thing. This is where I'm wondering, like, could someone, if you're someone with no beliefs whatsoever and you're a tarot reader, send us a message, info.pomegranategrove@gmail.com. But like, do you think that could exist where someone could almost scientifically, without belief, without tapping in, sort of look at cards the way that astrology could be looked at? What do you guys think?
With the cards?
I think there is one significant difference between cards and a chart, like regardless of psychic thing, and that is with an astrology chart, all of the planets are present. Whereas with a tarot card reading, unless you're like going to always read with the whole 78 cards just spread around, that you're going to only have like maybe say 10 or 12 cards out of a possible 78. Whereas with the astrology chart, everything is there. It's not like, oh, Mars has disappeared off to another universe this week, so well, you know what I mean, isn't there? They will always all be there, and it's up to the astrologer to choose what they feel is relevant to tell the client, you know what I mean, at that moment in time, out of those connections.
And then with a chart, the complexities of each individual are so vast that you could work with their chart for frickin' ever.
Exactly.
You know, with transits and everything. But with a tarot spread, it's kind of like a one and done. Does that make sense?
Okay. I just mean more like the methodology. Like, say, okay, like those a good example. We got 78 cards in a tableau. Let's say that's what you do as a reader. You pop down 78 cards and you look at them, much the same way as you look at a chart, right? We just we have arguably a big piece of data to now interpret. I don't know. Do you see what I mean? Not necessarily like what could be pulled from it, but the method of viewing and interpreting an astrology chart. I know they're not the same thing by any means, but like I'm trying to tie it back to the aspect of, could one read tarot without any connection, any belief in something, any, you know, in the way that astrology can be read and viewed by pulling up a chart and looking at. I know it's not the same because you can't just type in coordinates.
If you were pulling up an astrology chart and looking at it, you might be selective about the bits of information you choose to give to that client. Your intuition might say, this would be the most beneficial way of speaking to this client, but you are actually giving them sort of factual, you might not give them all the information, but the information you do give them is accurate. Do you know what I mean? If like the moon is making a positive connection with Venus, if it is, it is. You're not going to then say, oh, I don't think the moon in Venus is very good today. If it's a good connection, it's a good connection, and you know you can see that. So you're either choosing to tell them that or not tell them that for whatever reason. But whereas with the tarot cards, I don't know. I mean, yeah, would you not end up doing quite a generic sort of reading if you're just reading random cards so randomly because they're there?
Yeah. Perhaps, I don't know. Maybe if there was a system in place. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know, Cassidy. Your readings are always, your personal readings are always fantastic. They're very, very kind of appropriate. They're very accurate. They're very, you know, spot on. They're spot on. They're fantastic.
They are. And you don't need a formula for that. That's the beauty of tarot, is it's not formulaic. It's intuitive.
I'm just wondering if there's a way that could exist. I don't know. I'm just curious. I'm now really curious about the topic of not, because I you know, people work with ways of connecting and speaking with the universe, and I'm like, does it exist out there where people get accurate readings, pull great information with whatever system they choose to use with the cards, that is not rooted in a connection to something else? I don't know. Now I'm curious.
Would they admit to that though, and be taken seriously as readers? I mean, like the woman I've said this story before about the woman that was at an event, and I was speaking to someone. She said, "I've done an event." I've said this recently, and there was a person doing tarot readings, and at the end, I said, "Gosh, you were busy," and she went, "Yeah, it's ridiculous. I just make it up. It's a load of rubbish."
Wow.
That's
so. Would somebody who actually expected to kind of attract clients actually come out and admit, like, well, I don't speak to the universe. I don't have any connection with anything. It's just, I just say randomly what I think.
I just mean, like, because in the context of this episode being a cultural thing,
yes,
can one read the cards with no cultural beliefs? No,
can one exist with no cultural beliefs?
Yeah. So Cassidy, I think the question that maybe fits with what you're asking about more neatly is isn't so much about belief, because belief to me suggests something that's either well-defined or aiming to be well-defined, or to come up with an explanation for why things are the way they are. I think what I would say is necessary to perform as a good tarot reader, less so than as an astrologer, and I'll explain why. What is necessary for you to be a good tarot reader is to have an active kind of intuitive reception, right? You don't need to be able to explain how that works, but the fact that it does work also is clear indication that there are forces, factors that are not available to your logical mind. You know, you can't see them, you can't explain them. So therefore, I don't feel like a belief, a particular belief or spiritual philosophy is necessary. But I mean, I think what you're doing when you're doing a good tarot reading, whether you like to label it as such or not, is you are somehow channeling energy in a way that is not tangible, not that tangible. And so it can't be explained in atheistic, materialistic language, right? I don't even think in the language of what is it that they use? The waves, or the way that the scientific kind of this scientific lingo that tries to kind of make that type of communication tangible, quantifiable, explainable. I don't really think it works. It's in the end, it's just as speculative as saying that, oh, I got my messages from a higher dimensional being. Yeah. So, but the interesting thing about astrology, it's very interesting because although it can, and it is the vast majority of the time, read through a kind of, let's say, a systematic, a methodical approach, right? Scientific in as much as astrologers do believe that the planets and the signs are active influences, right? And that they are kind of interpreting them, how they work with each other on us, right? In spite of that, there is no, I mean, astrology strikes me as a kind of an interpretive approach that actually necessitates a philosophy, but it's practiced without one. And the reason I'm saying this is that it's just astrology presents itself as a system that can explain everything from who you are, right, to what is most likely to happen at such and such a date in your life, right? And the key, let's say, the key terms, or the key players, the key agents in the astrologers map of the world, like they are actual planets, right? They are actual, let's say, bodies, celestial bodies in an actual solar system, in which we actually live on an Earth, on an actual planet called Earth, that's part of that whole system, right? So because it's so comprehensive, because the approach is so comprehensive, it does necessitate, I think, in my perspective, a philosophy. Like, explain to me why Venus is the planet that embodies and channels the archetypal energies of love and peace, for example. But I mean, 99% maybe of them wouldn't dare to bring forth a philosophy in a kind of, in an assertive way, But to me, that doesn't really, I mean, that doesn't really fit with the scope of what astrology is actually giving you. And also doesn't fit with the historical origins of astrology, because it did start in religious context. Like in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, like they treated the planets either as like direct deities, or as kind of intermediary channels of the divine, and as did many of the ancient Greek astrologers and many of the medieval and Renaissance astrologers. They treated the planets as kind of celestial, kind of intermediary beings, channeling the will of a higher being. Yeah. So
Beautifully said.
thanks.
That was beautifully said. Oh, this is so interesting. What a great conversation. I'm enjoying the heck out of this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just think in life, there are certain things that you just go through where you just don't have to even connect to it. You can just sort of like go through the motions of it, and you could be kind of thinking about something else, or watching something else while you're doing it. Do you know what I'm saying? But there are just some things in life that require a kind of a much more heightened sort of focus to actually kind of like believe it yourself. It's like if I'm on stage in front of an audience, nothing to do with this, but if I'm playing a part in a show or something, I know damn well if I'm in the moment doing it, or if I'm just going through the motions of it because I've done it so many times, and then I come off stage and I think, did I just do that? That's not doing it justice to just kind of, do you know what I mean? You can do things where you're actually only 50% doing them, but getting away with it because you went through the motion of doing it, or you can actually put 100% into it. And that, to me, if you're giving 100% to anything, that is a connection with it, whether you're banging a drum, doing a dance, writing a book or a poem, or doing a tarot reading. If you are immersed in it properly, that to me is a spiritual practice.
And every time we pick up a deck of cards, we're being the fool. We are taking a leap of faith that somebody we can't see is going to answer. Even if it's somebody inside ourselves.
It's really true that what you're saying, Sharon, because I know a lot of singers have a fear that what if, like, one night I just walk onto the stage and open my mouth and the voice doesn't come out. Do you know what I mean? It just, you do what you do all the time, and all of a sudden it doesn't work. So anything, it's a bit like, what if you're a wonderful artist or something, and all of a sudden you just can't, the paintbrush just isn't doing it. I think that is a natural fear, and that is the fool, isn't it? It's like anything that is creative is basically you are doing the fool and hoping that.
I love it. I love the analogy. That's
very present. The fool is very present.
No one
with what's happening
in the end. No one wiser than the fool. No one wiser than the fool in the end.
Absolutely. and maybe it is the simplicity of the fool that is his biggest, strongest asset, you know?
I think it is.
Certainly.
And perhaps that comes back down to what you were saying, Cassidy. You can sort of overcomplicate it, that, you know, like you have to subscribe to this, that, the other, and you have to be at a certain level of connection before you dare to kind of use this tool. But maybe, as long as you're immersed in it 100%, if you've got a gift, it will work.
Definitely. Well, this has been fascinating. What a very cool topic.
Yeah,
I'm not going to know what to name this one.
No. Well, cultures
and beliefs.
Cultures, beliefs, and the leap of faith.
Oh, I love it.
Writing that down.
Tarot and systems of belief.
Well, that was fantastic. It's very rare we all get together for a podcast, so I'm so glad to see everybody here, including myself.
Yeah, it was so much fun.
And it's a shame Kevin couldn't stay for the whole thing. It's always lovely to have him here, and I loved his interpretation of the Nine of Swords. That was awesome.
That was
beautiful.
And how much we can learn from each other. Yeah.
And I think we should say here and now that anyone who is a Patreon is invited to these podcasts every week, along with all the other benefits of being one of our Patreon members. So, yeah.
I'll put the Patreon link in the write-up so you can find it.
And we will see you next week.
Awesome. Right, thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Khalid.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you for engaging with us. Please like, subscribe, and share. To book a personal, in-depth reading and to learn more about our incredible courses in tarot and astrology, please visit our website www.thepomegranate.grove.com.